The sun. We know all life on Earth is dependent on it. It governs the pattern of life, dividing the hours, days, months and years, the round of sowing, growth, harvest and decay. Yet today, it's easy to feel more disconnected from these cycles. Take a centrally heated city centre flat with ceiling spotlights, where strawberries can be bought from a corner shop at 3 a.m. in February. Here it's easy for our ancestors' stories of sun gods and goddesses to seem quite bizarre, or the idea of making offerings to appease the sun, it seems almost too strange to really consider. But perhaps there is space in our minds to think about what it might have felt like to have a more consciously interactive relationship with the sun, and even maybe to consider our own relationship with the largest and brightest object in our skies. From Earth, the sun appears to rise in the east, pushing away the darkness as it grows in strength, reaching maximum power at noon before it then declines, descending now into the west where it eventually falls below the horizon. Now, I don't know about you, but this isn't something I think about a lot. Like many people, I have a day job inside where I perform the same role under strips of lights regardless. Other than to note to the person nearest you a particularly striking sunset, many of us are perhaps only aware of what the sun is doing at the very periphery of our thoughts. We hope for a good show for our weekend plans. However, for lots of people, this isn't the case. The growers of the strawberries at our imagined February corner shop definitely think more about the sun cycles, likely as to the 13% of the world's population without electricity. You might be wondering when all the facts about Stonehenge will start, but it seems important to open with the acknowledgement that, the context many of us now live might feel so removed from nature that observing the solstices could seem slightly forced or contrived. But removed still doesn't mean disconnected, for we could, just simply put, never be that. You don't need to live in some rural idyll or the past. You don't need to have a prehistoric dolmen next door where you can sack off sleep to peer through it at sunrise. We really miss out if we think actively engaging with the cycles of the year is now solely for designated select people, as if it's just got nothing to do with the rest of us. As you know, Earth's tilted axis causes the seasons, that imaginary line between the North and South poles which is tilted from true by 23.5 degrees. Whilst the Northern Hemisphere is tilted towards the Sun and enjoying more light between June and September, the Southern Hemisphere is experiencing winter. Without the tilt in the Earth's axis, we would have the same degree of light, warmth, dark, cold, with no seasons at all. Imagine if it was always the equivalent of January in the UK. Ugh. No summer to look forward to, no crispy leaves or the relief of the first green buds of spring, life returning. No, just January, forever. So that's a pretty amazing reminder, and even as I say this, I'm looking out the window at the blossom on the other side of the road with a heightened appreciation. Wherever you are, just take a quick look around you and note any seasonal signals you can spot. If you're inside and you're able to, go to a window. No, really, give it a go. Really. And if you're like me and listen to podcasts whilst walking, you'll have no problem with this. Even in the most concrete of jungles, to quote Jeff Goldblum in Jurassic Park, life finds a way. Check the colour and amount of leaves on trees. Check for the state of hedgerows. What about blossom? Look for weeds and wildflowers cropping up through pavements and fences. Are there leaves on the ground? look for plant pots outside homes and displays of flowers to beautify town centres. Perhaps my questions don't apply to the landscape that you're looking at right now. Wherever you are, just take a moment. What is it that you can see? If you're outside, you can do the same for your other senses too. What does the air feel like on your skin? Are there any scents your nose can detect? If you're listening around the height of summer wherever you are, you might note a rich, pulsing coverage all around you due to plant life like Sheryl Crow, soaking up those long hours of extended daylight. A world building and buzzing and pushing before its zenith, its climax. It's all downhill from here. But let's be honest, when your focus is on a task or getting from A to B, it can actually be really easy not to notice the plethora of endless signs and movements of each season. Other than a noting that it's quite warm, it's actually easy to be unaware the longest day of summer is even coming up at all, until perhaps an aesthetically pleasing post on social media pops up to remind you before the next image vies for your precious attention. I've taken a moment to highlight the above exercise because I've noticed a significant benefit to my mental health when I perform it semi-regularly. It doesn't need to be a big thing. You don't need to fly out the fire escape at work and run into the nearest field sniffing. It's just an awareness you can bring to whatever you're doing right now. A remedy to the malady of that feeling of days just bleeding into one another. In a myriad of small, otherwise easily missable ways, nothing tomorrow will be quite the way it is today. The word solstice is derived from the Latin sol, sun, and sistere, to stand still. And on or around June 21st, the sun does seem to pause from Earth, appearing to stop moving northward and start a new journey south. As well as the two solstices, we also note the two equinoxes, Latin for equal night, where the sun crosses the equator in March and September. Now, these 4 dates have been extremely important to humanity since we first started to grow crops, for cultivating land, production, raising livestock, taking a key role in the rise of civilization. And when your livelihood is so directly and visibly linked to the land in this way, it's not hard to see how the sun takes centre stage in life. Our ancestors have built awe-inspiring structures over the millennia to track these important solstices and equinoxes. A marker could be located at the end of a long passage, which would be illuminated by the solstice sun. Many were designed to mark the moment when the sun rose or set on the longest or shortest day. At striking Callanish on the Isle of Lewis in the Outer Hebrides, isolated in their strange grandeur in a cruciform pattern, 4 rows of stones lead into a circle from 4 directions, whilst the circle itself is aligned to the solstice sunrises, sunsets, and the equinoxes. It is so far north that the sky never actually darkens on a midsummer night. The pun-intended rock star of prehistoric stone circles, Stonehenge, is thought to have been used as both a cemetery and astronomical observatory. It appears to mark midsummer's morning when the sun rises directly over the heelstone as seen from inside the monument itself. This then casts a long shadow that enters the Sarsen circle through the main entrance, perhaps symbolising fertilisation. And other sites orientated to midsummer include Avebury, Addington Barrow, Maberhenge, Randwick Barrow, Stanton Drew, and Templewood circles, to name only a few. And as well as marking these important dates, these sites also have some rather imaginative midsummer legends attached to them, only really adding to the appeal. On Midsummer Eve night, many stone circles of Britain and Ireland are supposed to come alive. There's the King Stone of the Rollright Stones on the Oxfordshire border, who is said to be a real king just temporarily trapped in a stony shape. On Midsummer Eve he is said to turn his head, and for hundreds of years pilgrims would visit the circle to witness this. God, that sounds like a long night. There's also the near stones known as the Whispering Knights, and on Midsummer's Eve they will whisper your future, especially the portion concerning your love life. But one of the most common themes of all are that the stone circles come alive and dance. As Anne Franklin notes, this is patently a folk memory of ancient rites concerned with the stones, which are often said to be heathen or irreligious dances petrified forever. This makes me think of the gorgeous Merry Maidens stone circle near Penzance, Cornwall, where local girls who broke the rules of the Sabbath by dancing wildly were turned to stone. The equally sinful musicians, now the large pillars known as the pipers, being petrified in nearby fields. Great fun to track down the whole crew on a free afternoon. And such moralistic folk stories, see also the Nine Maidens and the Dancing Stones at Tregeseal, may represent Christian methods of trying to eliminate pagan activity at these ancient ceremony sites, which still, today, attract visitors from all over the world, and certainly, if you can get there after the crowds have gone home, do have a certain atmospheric, unnameable quality to them. Christianity has a long history of transforming pagan sites that, somewhat inconveniently, are dotted across most of the British Isles, churches of a people who engaged in their own religious practices. And ditto celebrations, the festivities of the summer solstice were appropriated to the feast of St. John the Baptist. Fraser, in his landmark The Golden Bough, notes it's possible John not only took over the feast, but also the attributes of a vegetation god who is already a big hit at this time of the year. This is a common practice when re-establishing a festival, as the iconography is already familiar and accepted by people, making it a lot harder to challenge. But anything that couldn't be assimilated probably got banned. The Council of Tours of 567 was still taking a pop at those who persisted in performing pagan acts around stones, trees and fountains, and they were back at it again in 789 when another warning was issued. But the church had their work cut out for them, as folk customs morphed and changed, going underground before resurging again, a folk religion of the land that's hard to ever scrub completely away. People continued to light and dance around bonfires on midsummer, and right into the 20th century, ceremonies were held at Callanish on Lewis, despite strong discouragement from the church. A figure known as the Shining One was said to walk the Avenue of Stones on midsummer, although you can't help but wonder if this was just another name for the sun.